Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good time zone is someone I'd like to use as a greeting. So we're here today with some Q&A on Wayfinder from your own comments. Crazy, I know. Uh, Feel free to leave a comment on this video if you've got any additional questions. Also, the like, subscribe, all that stuff by the end. And we will go to see what sort of arcane knowledge we can impart to you. So starting off with our first question, which was kind of a broad one. It wasn't the first chronologically, but uh, kind of it was, well, how did they put it? An introduction to each character and how they play. So I think I kind of did this in what is Wayfinder video back in early access, but before we dive into each specific character, there's something to kind of follow on from there, which is you have three classes essentially. You've got Arcanus, like Kairos, which is this archetype down here. They do the fancy teleport dodge, and they do these enervation orbs, which can have all sorts of different powers depending what you're doing. Uh, Typically, Arcanus, you could build Wayfinders, as previously mentioned, in many different ways, but typically Arcanus specialize at just taking down huge groups of enemies very fast, whether it's Nis dashing through everything and obliterate, or Kairos unleashing tornadoes and siphons and rakes and all that. So that's typically your Arcanus niche. Moving on.
What are you waiting for?
I'll grab Silo here for a second. Laura is also an Arcanist. She doesn't entirely fit that same archetype I just described, but she is part of the same class. Survivalists, kind of the rogues of Wayfinder. They expose hits. They expose enemies' weaknesses when they do critical hits, making them take more damage. So almost every, whether it's Silo or Venomous or any additional crit survivalists they might add in the future if things go well, they usually want to go for crits pretty significantly. They do have different ways to force their crits without necessarily building directly into that, but that's a much more long discussion. Survivalists also dash, but they can range higher and they have reduced stamina on their dashes, so they get more mobile. Now, the War Master is your fighter type, essentially. They actually get probably more variety than some of the other classes. Your War Masters are going to be Grendel, Senja, and Wingrave. Would help if I point at the right one while I'm talking about them, eh?
Will be done.
So War Masters, they get a dodge roll. They do have more stamina and they get their resilience back, which is how you block. It's that yellow bar that stops you and gives you additional defense when it's active as well. Same with enemies. If you guard break enemies, you'll notice they will take huge more amounts of defense, which we'll actually be talking about in a minute. But also, they have the Art of War. Their weapon abilities charge faster. When they use their weapon ability, they'll increase weapon power on the War Master and nearby allies. They can actually do that pretty significantly. The biggest curtail to that is that War Masters, typically, the people using the weapon power are typically also War Masters. But moving that aside, we'll do a little bit of a run through with each character here. So bear with me, and we will be here in just a second. So Wingrave is he's very much a tanky paladin crusader type. Again, you can build Wayfinders anyway, but they're gonna have their archetypes. So when you're building your Wingrave, he's typically going to be very, very strong. He produces a lot of different healing effects. And he's basically going to be able to taunt enemies, stand in the middle of enemies, generally speaking. You'll probably use a sword and shield, though you don't have to. Things like that. And he can throw in a lot of different heals and generally keep the entire team alive, not just himself as well. So that's pretty much Wingrave's role, unless you really want to do something completely strange with him. That's going to be most likely what you actually end up doing here. Being a good old tanky boy. Silo's almost the opposite. As I said, he's a rogue. He's also the only character in Wayfinder who doesn't have a self-heal or a damage shield option. That said, Silo has a lot of different options that you can put to use. Generally speaking, he does have a defense. He can taunt people, and he taunts them to attack something that's not himself, which is definitely a benefit. He also throws out, like, debuff bombs. You can build Silo for direct damage, but a lot of the time he's actually applying effects and stacking them up and using those to his advantage. He's a bit more of a trickster or a gadget type fighter. I usually call them curse casters, or generally speaking, where it's all about throwing a lot of debuffs and basically making the enemy kind of garbage. That's Silo's usual deal. Of course, depending, he comes with a gun, not this one, but he does come with a gun. That's probably the main way to use them, though I've heard some good things about different melee weapons with Silo as well. So Nis, the third story Wayfinder, is on paper an Arcanist, which means mage. She plays a lot more like a rogue or assassin you would typically find in Norm games. She's very upfront and in your face sort of thing. You'll see what I mean in a second. Most people are going to play her with melee stuff, but you don't necessarily have to. But you can obviously see the crowd controlling immediate effect of mages here. Nis starts with daggers, which are very agile and let you parry to avoid all damage, but you can build Nis in a lot of ways, particularly once you get some levels on her, because then you unlock the previously thing I mentioned with the damage shields, and she suddenly becomes a whole lot less squishy. One thing with Nis is make sure your camera distance is set suitably far back, or this dashing thing she does will be incredibly nauseating and hard to keep track of anything. And that's Nis. She does the dodgy and the stabby smacky thing. Not terribly complicated in the end of the thing. But yeah, she is labeled as a shadow dancer and typically moves very quickly, but doesn't really, can be a little squishy to start with. Doesn't really, has to kind of be in the middle of the enemy fire, so you are going to need to learn to use your dodges and your evades or your parries as necessary. Kyra's, of course, should need no introduction on this channel if you watched any of the Let's Play. My Kairos is not quite the normal archetype, but as I mentioned, still got a lot of that crowd clearing potential of those. You've got big, large scale attacks like that. Again, he's kind of weirdly up close with a lot of his attacks, like mid-range at best. It's kind of hard to stand back with a gun and use Kairos. But yeah, he is the one that is the pure wizard, essentially. I turned him into a tank because I'm a weirdo who does that sort of thing, but pretty much you're going to see a lot of this and his ultimate tornado going on. So yeah, he is the big blasty wizard of Wayfinder. Moving on to another character that I build backwards. Senja. Wayfinder's resident gladiator champion. Before Grendel came along, I'd call her the barbarian of the group, but comes with a two-handed sword, which is not, but I gave her the daggers again to be ludicrous. Senja is not terrible solo, but she really shines as a team support character. She can taunt guys by doing this, as well as buffing the team. She has immense break power with her attacks like this. She can pull enemies. Probably like her only strictly self-focused thing is probably her ultimate, which does the chain lightning. And like many supports in video games, she buffs herself too, but she will give a huge amount of buffs and stuff out to the team, probably more than any other character if I had to say offhand. And that's really her role as the team buffer. If Wingrave's the team healer, Senja is the one that will buff the crap out of them. Both their weapon and ability power, depending on the perks you choose. So yeah, she's actually a support character. That's just kind of, and she has a lot of different possible utilities she gets as a result of that. She can sort of tank or be the damage dealer to some extent, depending on how you build her. That's Senja though. On to the next. Moving on, we've got Venomous. Venomous is another slightly complicated character because, as you might expect from a poison person who comes with a automatic rifle, she is a DPS, single target, generally focused. She's also kind of weirdly a healer. Like this grenade is a heal. Those things shoot out and shoot healer pulses back to you. This little trio will also heal her, but not teammates generally. Now, there are many different ways to build Venomous. A very popular one is daggers, because she applies poison stacks with every single hit, and daggers hit very quickly. There is no specific way to build Venomous. Currently I have a gun on her. It's not my favorite gun in the world, for being honest. But yeah, she's a very odd DPS healer combo. It's a little strange to get used to, but very, very powerful. And moving on to our second to last Wayfinder. Now this is Grendel. Besides having a couple of the funniest waypoint voice lines in the game, Grendel is very much your barbarian. He specializes in getting on top of the enemy, staying on top of the enemy, and breaking the crap out of their guard meters so that they can't do anything. One kind of caveat, so almost anything he fights, if you build him generally to the style that best suits him, will be permanently guard broken and constantly stun locked, which works very well with large, big area swingy weapons. And he can literally leap into enemies to close gaps and do this if he gets crowded. The one caveat with Grendel is, while he can be quite powerful, if you're fighting bosses, and you don't kill them in one guard break, they get a temporary window where they cannot be guard broken. That can be very dangerous to Grendel. There are ways to build around that and shield, kind of tank him up a little in that situation, but it's definitely something that can catch him out big time. But yeah, Grendel is very much the guy if you want to just go hit something with a giant sword and watch it crumple beneath your feet, or giant scythe in this case. He's the Wayfinder for you. He could probably use a little touch up. He's one of the ones I'd probably put in as maybe needs a little adjustment, which makes fully sense because he's one of the ones that wasn't released during the previous early access, so he's had the least amount of hands-on time from people to get tuned up. Anyhow, so yeah, Laura is also a wizard of a slightly different sort. Her powers are basically telekinesis, by and large. She surrounds herself with a shield, she throws force blasts. If you use enough powers or land enough attacks rapidly enough, she builds up this meter called Chedling that will enhance her abilities when cast, when it's full. Which is fairly self-explanatory. She also has this little rocket dodge. See, that's a channeled ability there. As is that. Her ultimate, which I can't trigger in the context of a short little, like, 2-minute or 90-second string up here. She turns into a giant golem and just starts beating the crap out of everything.
I'm trained for this.
The one thing to be careful of in that scenario is that her golem is very unable to jump or dodge properly. It also can't use those hook shots like the ones I just used, which can actually get you killed in a couple of boss fights where that's a very major mechanic. So, be very cautious when you're using Laura about that sort of stuff. You can see her turning slightly into the golem during her channeled dash there. But yeah. Again, Wayfinder's wizards tend to be this weird combination of weirdly mid-range. Oh, there's the golem. So yeah. This is Laura's ultimate. Everything's already dead though. But yeah. You can jump, but you can't dash. Or do any kind of hook shot stuff like that up there. So hopefully that gives a nice little overview for anyone else who's looking to kind of get a general check out with getting into huge build guides. We'll move on to the next topic here. Fair warning, it's going to be a little dry though. So if you're just here for the overview of the Wayfinders as per the start of the title, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you found it helpful, all that. Because now we're going to dive into question number 2 on my list of commenters here, which is inventory management. So inventory management, everyone's favorite thing. If you're riding your mount to Arsenal, don't ride through the bar, you'll get knocked off your mount. So you're better off just fast traveling to this waypoint here for Market Row. Arsenal being where you sell things, other than echoes. You can just sell weapons, accessories, housing. You can mark them for selling too. Housing is kind of to your personal taste. The only thing I will say for housing is there's a few things like the Skeleton Thief's Chest and the Trickster's Artifice here. It'll give you a Skeleton Key 1 per day. Having extras of those does not boost the effect. Like you cannot get 2, 3, 4, 5 Skeleton Keys per day or anything like that. Other than that, go wild, it's your house. I'm not going to tell you what to put in it, but once you've decided, for instance, that I don't need any more blood ticks in my house, you can obviously just sell away. Weapons. So, and with the full caveat that this doesn't really matter until you get to level 30 and probably more until you're into like the super end game. Generally, you're going to use whatever weapon has the highest level in the top left. You'll eventually get a higher copy until you get these level 38 ones from the Mythic Hunts. And your choice of weapon, of course, is up to you. If you really hate a weapon, like I do not like Voidbinder at all, you could just sell all copies of it. That's perfectly fine. One trick with weapons, though, is if you're trying to get accessory drops, if you let your weapons inventory fill up completely so you can't pick up any more weapons, you'll get accessories instead of a weapon when you're farming bosses. That said, typically you sell whatever's lower than the max level. If you are looking at what is the max level, there's different schools of thought, but a lot of people prefer the attack slots and the balance slots over the defense slots, or the cross slots in some cases. You will never change that one slot that's in the top left corner of the icons. They're in the bottom left corner of the icon. It will always be the rush slot. Generally, the reasoning for that is most of the attacks in Wayfinder you can dodge completely, and in a lot of cases you can get attack is just going to give you that DPS, and if you do want your max health, your resilience, that's the two big two. The other two defensive stats are not that useful outside of niche situations. You can get them through the balance or the cross slots as well. Same thing kind of applies to accessories. Use whatever's the highest level until you start getting the level 30, 35 ones. Essentially, you'll reach a point at the game where you start having enough of these purples, let's just sort by rarity, that you don't use the blues or the greens anymore. Or blues and whites, which no, it is green. Okay. And you just sell all them en masse when you get them to clear space. When you are looking at accessories, basically you might want to keep more than one. It depends if you think you're going to use it across build. That said, the stats on them are always going to usually suit a particular build, and I haven't really found one that's super overlaps that I would use on two Wayfinders. Your kind of end goal target is to get a full purple set on your Wayfinder as best suits them. Your best bet, I'll put the link to the wiki, which is definitely a work in progress, down below for specific artifact hunting. Again, that's a very end game concern. One important thing to know about artifacts is there will always be one part of the set that you have to craft, and the other two aren't here. This menu also will not populate until you find the other parts of the set. You have to find, I believe, one part of the set to make this craft. Yeah, and the other thing is if you're trying to get your max level artifacts to drop, you want for level 30 stuff, you want to be power level 2700. For level 35 stuff, where it drops, you want to be power level 3700 and a little change, or you won't actually get those to drop at that level. The only kind of other inventory management is potions. You can craft potions over here. I've never found I've really had to craft one. Occasionally you might craft this one. This one seems to be a lot rarer because it's quite powerful.
Looking to sell?
But yeah, potions.
Ooh, I'd offer a fair price.
Trying to think, they're in resources. There's a way to get rid of the potions that I don't super remember. I think you have to actually go into your character menu. The potions don't have a set limit anyways. Yeah, and do this. In here, basically, you can see I have basic Stomper Blood Brew, and then I have Greater Stomper Blood Brew. You can pretty much figure out which one of those is the better version and then sell the original junk. So yeah, that's inventory management for your inventory. Your armor just kind of adds as a permanent unlockable as you find it. Nothing big there. Echoes. I'm actually going to do this in the other menu because it's a little, didn't get confused. Basically, if you want to keep your highest level one at your highest rarity, and you can only equip, without getting into a few weird bugs and glitches that are probably fixed by now, you can only equip one of you can only have one alpha hollow on your character, And you're always going to want it to be the strongest one generally, unless you're still leveling up your characters, and you might have use for keeping a few lower ones kicking around to get the use because of the low capacity stuff. But so yeah, I don't need these. One thing would be if I had a purple level 32, it would be the same as a white level 35. Each level rarity basically adds +1 level to it, even before you upgrade it. But yeah, essentially you keep your highest level, your highest rarity. Once you're more than 3 higher, a white is better than a purple from the lower level. So your end goal there is obviously to have purple everything. One thing is with the rush echoes that drop from the bosses, it does not matter. Leveling them up reduces the capacity they cost, but they will always drop at the same level and they will always do the same effects, no matter what rarity they are. As far as I know, the rarity does nothing. It might reduce capacity. I haven't paid that much attention. Capacity, particularly on your weapon and Wayfinder, does not really become a concern once you start getting anywhere near the end game. So that's a relatively quicker than I thought, inventory management section. We will move on to another topic here, which is difficulty. I've answered the difficulty thing so many times on the Discord, particularly. There's 2 forms of difficulty. One matters and one doesn't. The one that doesn't is this. Apparently it was on challenging. Why was it? Who knows? When did that come out? I think I turned it down because someone was with me on a mythic hunt or something, and they were just getting absolutely rocked, and I didn't want to kick them out of my party, so I was like, I'll just drop the difficulty. And the reason I can do that is this does nothing to your rewards. Doesn't matter what you do, it's just personally what level you happen to enjoy the game at. If you want my personal taste, I started on normal. I bumped it up to challenging. It was still kind of Heroic is a little kick your backside at a couple of encounters, we'll say, or different specific modifiers, but generally speaking, not too hard. The other one is Nightmare, which is only available for new saves, and it hasn't actually been added to the game yet. It's going to be added in December. Basically, you play on a Nightmare save. Think of it almost like a League or from Path of Exile or an Expedition from No Man's Sky, if you're familiar with that. You play on another save. It's meant to be a super hard challenge mode. They haven't really specified what those challenges are or how that difficulty is going to work, and I'm kind of hoping it's not just, hey, the boss has 5 million hit points now sort of situation. Once you play through those challenges, you unlock special Nightmare artifacts and bonuses that will be available in all your saves. And then you can bring that back to the main one. I will probably at least have a look at it on the channel here when it does come out. I won't guarantee a whole Nightmare playthrough though, because there's a certain extent where I'm unlocking special stuff for what? To do what? There's that end game. I know some people do find it fun, but the end game where it's just like I'm unlocking the stuff to do 6.6% more damage to the bosses that I can already kill, sort of situation isn't my personal jam. The other kind of difficulty is world scaling. World scaling I have covered what it does in one of the other videos as well, but it basically tries to keep the enemies at level with you or even slightly higher level than you. So you can go down into the highlands and fight level 30 goblins and stuff and get level 30 echoes and drops as well. That will be more difficult until you actually start catching up to those. Once you get your build together and you get to start getting towards those levels, you basically outpower them anyways, and then they stop scaling. But it will give you it'll keep things interesting for the early on if you want to run through the open worlds rather than just fast traveling. Moving on. Still in the inventory kind of thing. Arsenal. who's right here.
Do you hear us?
Arsenal here is kind of a pity system. If you can't get your weapon to drop, she will unlock her inventory here as you level up, more or less. Some of it's actually based on story progress, and a couple of weapons you do have to do a specific side quest like Eclipse here to actually unlock. She doesn't unlock all the weapons either, so there's always going to be a weird few that just kind of do not open from her. You'll probably find higher level versions of the weapons than she's dropping for most of it. So she's really a last resort if you really can't get, if you've picked up a weapon but you really cannot get the higher level version to drop at all to save your life because RNGesus hates you, you can go to Arsenal and buy a weapon. The kind of later game upscaled super version of that is up here at the Great Lift. Beep. Which is the Huntmaster for the Mythics.
Before the fall.
Once you unlock Mythics, you can go to the board here, do these bounties for glory. You can also get glory by fighting the Mythic exclusive bosses. Glory can be traded for quite a lot of different things here, but most specifically level 38 versions of every single weapon, except for 4. There are 4 weapons which you specifically can only unlock by getting them from these. These are what's called the mythic bosses in the middle here. These 4 in the void. You have to get their specific weapons from them. You can never buy them. And then one last thing here, and we'll quickly throw in a clip. It was, how do you increase your stamina? Well, find these little lines on the talent tree and increase your stamina. That said, you may not be able to get to those little lines while actually getting your nodes you actually want. So the other option to increase your stamina is the Equilibrium Echo. It gives you plus 30. I'm not sure, I believe the stamina is 100, but don't quote me on that. I've never actually found the number anywhere. Where do you get this Equilibrium Echo though? I'm happy you asked. We'll show you that right now. So for the Equilibrium Echo, now I believe this can spawn in the Undercrop, but I mostly find it in the Repository of Knowledge. Basically, you're looking for this hallway with the yellow on one side and the purple on other in this little cross formation in the Repository of Knowledge. That said, it's not 100% guaranteed to spawn even if this tile shows up. It's a little like the orb puzzle. Sometimes the orb puzzle isn't there and there's just a water pool instead. So I could run through this expedition like 1,000 times, or I could just show you some other footage I have of me getting the Equilibrium Echo, which I'm sure you'll love, and why you do not try and farm the Equilibrium Echo when you're running double Chaos Mutators. So we'll wrap the video up with just a silly little clip of me getting the Equilibrium Echo in the worst circumstances possible for you. So yeah, this is the Equilibrium puzzle. Don't mind the fire. Basically, you need to get your orbs to match the color on the wall. If you've ever played a puzzle game, you've probably done this little toggle one, toggles the adjacent one scenario. Once you do it, you get the Equilibrium Echo. There's a fancier version with a lot more orbs, but it's also the same old puzzle. So once again, if you have found any of this useful, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already and you want to see more Wayfinder content. Check out the links down in the description below. Leave a comment if you do have any questions, maybe for a follow-up video. We will see you next time. Enjoy and have a good one.